starting dinner until like 6:30, and who wants to cook for 2 hours and eat at 9 o'clock at night? But the good thing about it is a lot of times whatever I have for dinner, I make enough for like lunch the next day. So then lunch is really easy, but then I find myself at the same issue the next day, the next night.
Yeah. Yep, that makes so much sense. I can totally relate to like getting home super late and just being like, oh my God, you just kind of feel like that dread. And then you're like, oh, I'll just get takeout. And then, yeah, it's kind of like this tough situation to be in. So I'm definitely gonna dive into like some really quick, easy meals that you can throw together super easy that are kind of foolproof that I have worked into my repertoire and I use them like all the time. For example, tonight I just did it because it was time got away from me and it was like 5 o'clock and I was like, oh gosh, I only have an hour to like make dinner and eat. So I threw together one of these meal plans, ironically, because we were talking about it tonight. And Kayla in the chat box says, I have a meal plan, but I ran out of ideas after a few weeks. Yep. Totally.
Yeah, I agree with the first person that spoke. I do great with lunches, and then dinner, it's like, I don't know. I don't have enough time to think about it.
Mm-hmm. And when you do lunches, do you usually make them yourself?
Yeah, so Sunday is my meal prep day for lunches. I have boxes that I make giant salads for. So I eat the same thing every day basically for lunch. The things that vary would be like my sides. So I'll have just a big salad, usually with like a yogurt or cottage cheese and some sort of fruit. But then it's like we don't plan anything during the week for dinner. So it's just kind of like, what do you want? I don't know. I'm hungry. What do you want? I don't know. I'm hungry. We get takeout.
Yep. Yep. All right, so I'm gonna jump right into this then, since we've given people, I think, enough time to join. So before we jump into things, I'll first introduce myself. My name is Amanda, and I'm an integrative nutritionist and health coach. I also graduated from culinary school in 2018. And I'm the founder of Amanda Gale Wellness, which is my one-on-one coaching practice where I focus on helping busy women who are struggling with digestive issues. I personally struggled with IBS for many years, and I'm now on a mission to help women heal their gut like I have done, and in order to feel more comfortable and confident in their bodies again. Again, I'm really excited to be talking about meal planning today because this habit is honestly one of the core pillars to maintaining my own personal health because it allows me to keep my body nourished and satisfied and thus, less snacking and binging. I've also noticed that having a plan around meals does take a huge weight off my plate during the work week. And I'm excited to have this opportunity to just share a bunch of the stuff that I've learned and how I stay organized in my kitchen. So let's get started. Again, feel free to at any moment during the presentation to unmute yourself, ask a question, pose questions in the chat box. I'm going to do my absolute best to keep up with the chat box. And at the end, though, I will have some time for us to address any questions that you guys have or throw ideas around and stuff like that. So anytime we start something new, especially a new habit or a change in lifestyle, getting connected to your why is essential. It's like the fuel to your engine. If you don't have a purpose or a goal that you're working towards, your motivation is going to fade very fast. So I want you to think about your why and get connected to it. Why is your health important to you? What would it mean if you felt more nourished, more energized, and less stressed out around food? I know it's kind of a loaded question, but just think about it. And what would you do with the extra money you saved by cooking more and eating out less? In the chat box, let me know what your biggest reason is for wanting to meal plan and for joining us today. I know some of you guys said that to help save you time for those late nights when you come home and you just need something to put together. That's definitely a good reason for being here, because we're going to talk about that. But if you guys have any other reasons as to why you're here or what your goal is to incorporating meal planning into your life, feel free to put it in the chat box so we can have a mini discussion in there about it. I'm just going to read some of these really quick. Okay. Spend more time with family and friends. Yep. So first, let's talk about some of the common objections that I hear from clients when it comes to meal planning. A lot of people object to meal planning or eating healthy because they don't have enough time. And if you say you don't have enough time, I want you to ask yourself, how are you really spending your time? And think about it. If you spend time every day thinking about what to cook, going to the store to pick up last minute ingredients, cooking, eating the meal, cleaning up, that can add up to like 3 hours a day. And you multiply that by like 7 days, and you've spent upwards of like 21 hours a week just on meals. And that's entirely way too much time for the average person. But most of us do continue to spend this time deciding what to eat and eating. We don't even realize it. So if you're somebody who does have limited time, meal planning truly is your friend. If you really don't have enough time to cook or shop, you can still meal plan, but you can use different services to kind of fill out your week if that's accessible to you. For example, Thrive Market. I don't know if any of you have heard of Thrive Market, but I use this all the time, and it's an online marketplace for all natural, organic, dry goods. They have beauty products, cleaning supplies, all kinds of awesome things. And I absolutely love this service because I've noticed it has saved me so much time, because I can get everything that I need online. They have a beautiful app, and I spend way less time at the grocery store when I'm there by getting all of my cleaning and house and makeup and all that stuff through this website. And they have all kinds of common brands you would find. And another thing that's really great about it is they're typically a lot cheaper than what you would find at the grocery store. And I have done the price checks because I live on a budget, and so I've checked all the goods on there. I would say if it's comparable to like Market Basket in a lot of the goods that they have as far as prices go. So that's great. Another thing to utilize for produce especially is finding a local farmer's market and supporting your CSA. Also, there's services like Imperfect Foods and Misfit Market, and they deliver produce right to your door. I do know, for those of you who are in Boston, that there are deliveries through the farmer's market that you can also get delivered right to your home, so you don't have to go to the farmer's market. There's also services like meal prep delivery. I have some of them listed out here. So these do exist. So if you are somebody who does have a really busy schedule and you really don't have time to meal plan during the week, these are great options to utilize to kind of supplement your meal plan as you go along. Another common objection that I hear is it's hard to eat healthy on a budget. And all this takes is getting familiar with the grocery store and learning how to prioritize the foods you want to spend on. So first, know that investing in your health is essential. While it may seem like a lot at first, as you build your healthy staple items and start buying more food for your home, it's far cheaper than eating out regularly or the amount you pay in doctor's visits and medications and hospital bills later on if you don't take care of your health now. Buying in bulk is a huge money saver. So things like beans, lentils, grains, these are all really cheap to buy when you can get them in the bulk section. And these things can really amp up the volume of a meal to help kind of stretch it out further while adding also great nutrition like fiber and protein. You'll definitely want to make friends with the bulk section, especially if it has spices too. Buying spices in bulk can also be a big money saver. On the other hand, you can also utilize wholesale stores like Sam's or BJ's or Costco, and they sell large quantities for a really affordable cost as well. Cooking in bulk is also super helpful. So it stretches out your food dollar, and it also saves you time. So for example, I'll cook a big batch of rice early in the week, and I'll use it for sides. I'll toss it into my salads, or I'll just mix it into other recipes throughout the week. Just having it prepped in my fridge takes a lot of weight off my shoulders, especially because rice, if you're cooking it from dry, can take a bit longer. So to have it already made, done, that's awesome. So another example would be making like a huge pot of soup or like a whole sheet pan of chicken, cooking your proteins ahead of time. Again, another thing to like toss on a salad or use as your main entree and stuff like that. If you cook in larger quantities, you don't have to cook again later in the week, and you don't have to make a bunch of different recipes that require a bunch of different ingredients either, which can also add up cost-wise. So just keep in mind, it takes just as much time to roast 1 chicken breast as it does to roast 5 chicken breasts. And it takes just as much time to make 2 cups of soup as it does to make 10. I'm sure you guys get the idea. So just choosing a couple of key ingredients, maybe say like prioritizing what's on sale that week, and cooking in bigger batches is really key. So another thing is to prioritize the food you buy, is to know that organic really is important, but it doesn't always have to be at the top of your list. So you can use the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15 list to help you choose which foods to focus on when you're out grocery shopping. Let me know in the chat box or unmute yourself if you guys have heard of the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen.
I'm not familiar with that.
All right, so these are, so the Dirty Dozen are or the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen, they're lists that are put out every year by an organization called the Environmental Working Group. And what it is it details the produce that's most contaminated with pesticides and the produce that's least contaminated with pesticides. So you can really prioritize your shopping to fit within your budget. So the Dirty Dozen is what you want to prioritize buying organic. So they list out 12 of the quote dirtiest produce, the ones that have the most, like herbicides and all that stuff. And then they also have the Clean 15, which is a list of 15 produce that, when they tested them, had the least amount of harmful chemicals. And I'll send you guys in the Facebook group a link to view these lists. They're great to have like on your refrigerator. They also have an app. It's the EWG Healthy Living app, it's called. And that's actually an incredible database that I could go on a whole tangent about. But on that app, you can also find those lists so that way you have them while you're grocery shopping. Next, don't be afraid of frozen produce. If you live in a place that makes it difficult to get really fresh produce all year round, which I'm sure most of us do because we're here in New England, or if you experience the seasons, frozen produce is truly your friend. So fresh strawberries in January, I'm sure most of you know, they do not taste very good. And because of this, I almost never buy fresh berries in the winter because they just taste like water. And buying frozen berries is great for things like smoothies, adding to your oats or your yogurt. And also frozen vegetables are perfectly good as well. And a lot of times you can find these on sale. It does depend on how you're using them because they do lose their original texture when they're frozen, but they're great additions for things like stir fries, soups, or anything blended like tossed into your smoothies. Frozen fruit and vegetables are picked typically and frozen at their peak freshness. So unlike the fresh produce that's sitting in the produce section, which was probably picked far away, sat on a truck for who knows how long, and it's probably been sitting on that shelf waiting for someone to pick it up. And that time lag, during that time, these fruits and vegetables, they actually lose nutrients along the way. So as soon as something is picked, from that moment on, it starts to lose nutrients slowly. So frozen is more economical in the off season, and it's actually more nutritious as well during the off season. So if you're in season buying them in store, I just want to make sure I clarify. If you're in season buying them in store, you usually don't have to worry about that because a lot of stuff is picked more locally. So the 4-step method. I'll go over all of these in depth, but I just want to give you an overview to start off. So the first one is to get inspired. And that's the part where you look for recipes that you want to use, or you just simply look in your fridge and your cabinet and figure out what you have to use up and then go from there. The second step is to plan. This is where you will physically plan out your meals on a calendar or on a piece of paper or your phone or in your notes app, whatever works best for you. The third step is to shop. That's kind of self-explanatory, but I will talk about how to have a well-stocked fridge and pantry and how to save money at the grocery store. And then the fourth is, of course, prep, and we'll talk about how to prioritize and be more efficient with your time. When looking for inspiration, consider one pot or one pan meals or slow cooker meals. This saves you time because you spend way less time cleaning, because all you have to do is, clean out that one pot, pan, or whatever. And personally, I have a slow cooker pulled pork recipe. I made it last week, and I love this because I put it in the morning. I don't even have to think about it. I come home at night, it's all done. And I'll use that on tacos, of course, because it's pulled pork. Tacos are awesome. And I'll also use it in sandwiches or wraps. I'll toss it on a salad. I'll serve it with eggs for breakfast. So sometimes all you need is like 1 or 2 recipes to make and then just adapt them throughout the week. To save even more time, try to think of multiple uses for one ingredient. For example, you can cut up peppers for a wrap or a salad or an omelet. You can prep some boiled eggs to use as a snack or for breakfast, to top on salads, stuff like that. A good tip is to opt for roasting recipes because it's really easy to do a lot at once. And all you need is a sheet pan and some vegetables that have similar roasting times. So I told you guys that I did this tonight for dinner because time got away from me, and so I needed to put a quick dinner together. So I did a sheet pan and I roasted it with some chicken. What else did I do? I did sweet potato, some zucchini, and a little bit of onion. And I also had some chicken thighs. I tossed that in some salsa, and then I just roasted it in a sheet pan, and it took me like 5 minutes to put together, and it was done in like 30 minutes in the oven. So roasting is an awesome technique when you're in a bind or you just need to do something really fast. So another huge time saver and energy saver is creating a master list of tried and true recipes. So have a list of your go-to meals that you've tried before and you know that you can easily put together. And overlap ingredients where possible to save time as well throughout the week. Also, once you create a meal plan, especially if you do it, say, like 3 or 4 times, you can just start to reuse them. And if you have created shopping lists for these meal plans, just rotate through those as well. And finally, make sure that you choose food that you will actually eat. You will be realistic about your taste in food. If you don't like kale, don't buy kale. We want to reduce food waste. We don't want to be wasting food. But also try to diversify your menu enough so that you don't get bored or resort to takeout. definitely take a look in your fridge and pantry and see what needs to be used up first, and try building meals from there. If you don't keep food stocked, you can find recipes you want to make on Instagram, Pinterest, cookbooks, magazines, blogs, stuff like that, and go from there. Some of my personal favorite blogs are Love and Lemons, love them. Minimalist Baker is really great, and also Feed Me Phoebe. Do you guys have any favorite recipe blogs that you go to? I'd love to know what they are. Definitely feel free to share it in the chat box. Oh, Christina says, I love one-pan meals. I have 2 salmon sheet pan meals that are bomb. That's awesome. I love salmon. Pinterest. Yeah, Pinterest is one of my go-tos for recipes as well. Definitely a hole. All right. So another thing that's really important is to make sure that you're creating a balanced dish so you feel nourished and full after your meals. So what does this mean? It's not an exact science by any means. This is very general, but you can just use your hand as like an easy visual to see if you have good balance in your meal. So I have a little graphic here, and about 1 to 2 fists, so 2 fists together, or about 1 full hand size portion of vegetables, that's ideal. And then you want about 1 to 2 palms of protein, and then 1 cupped hand of complex carbs, which is about a half a cup, 1 to half a cup. And so these are things, the carbs are things like sweet potato, butternut squash, black beans, quinoa, brown rice, things like this. And so protein are things, of course, like organic meats and seafoods, beans, tofu, quinoa. And then as far as fat goes, you want fat to be about like your thumb size, which is about 1 to 2 tablespoons or so. Typically, it's 1 serving for women and 2 serving for men, but I'm all about listening to your body and adjust where you feel like you need to. So it's just a starting point. Everybody is very, very different. You know, you may need to adjust portions based on your size, based on your caloric needs, your physical activity, your hunger, and your fullness. This is just to give you a general idea of portion size as you move forward with your meal planning. So no recipe, no problem. I want to talk about building blocks. So in addition to the one pot dishes I've talked about, there's a few foundational ingredients and techniques that I rely on. Again, perhaps the simple roasted vegetable or a combination of vegetables is awesome. I absolutely love roasting because the heat, the high heat, really caramelizes the natural sugars in the foods, making them sweet, kind of like nature's candy, right? So good. And they're also a great side dish on their own, and they taste great mixed into grains on top of salads for a pop of sweetness. I love tossing like sweet potato or roasted carrots in a salad. It like totally changes the game for me. And it's also super simple. I mean, all you have to do is like cut up your vegetables, toss them in salt, coconut oil, whatever oil that you cook with. You place them on a baking sheet, pop them in the oven at 400 or 425, and you just cook them until they're lightly brown and tender. Another great building block is a pre-cooked grain or legume. So prepping these ahead of time will really save you lots of time later. And this could be a simple bowl of rice or lentils. Lentils aren't as common as rice, so if you guys haven't tried lentils, totally recommend trying lentils. My motto is variety is the spice of life. And for lentils, one thing that I really love to do with them is I'll cook them, and you can just read the package instructions for how to do that. And then once they're done, sprinkle it with a little bit of salt, give it a good squeeze of fresh lemon juice, toss in a little bit of olive oil, maybe chop up some fresh herbs, and it's delicious. And you can use this in your mixed salads, serve it on a side with your main entree, and it goes really great with vegetables. I absolutely love lentils, and a lot of grains you can do this with. And you can also, if you have these pre-cooked grains and you're like, oh my gosh, what do I do with them? You can also toss them into like saucier dishes. So maybe like a curry or a homemade soup, something like that. Also, if you feel like you're not going to use them, you can freeze grains really easily. You just have to make sure that they cool thoroughly before you put them in the freezer. So let them cool in your refrigerator before you freeze them. Also, hold on, I gotta let my cat in. She's scratching at my door. So I've always got a homemade dressing or sauce hanging out in my fridge as well. A nice sauce or dressing is truly key to adding extra flavor and diversity to your meals. So some of my favorite sauces are homemade balsamic, peanut sauce, pesto, hummus, romesco sauce, which if you don't know what that is, it's a roasted red pepper sauce. So if you're somebody who struggles with meal planning because you don't like to eat the same thing twice, adding a sauce to diversify your flavor is perfect. So if you have grains sitting in your kitchen, you're like, oh my God, I don't want to eat rice for the third day in a row, toss it with some pesto and have some pesto rice, and it will totally change the game. Or toss it in some peanut sauce and it will make the experience a lot better for you. So now that you have chosen your recipes, step 2 is plan it out. So this is super important, especially when you're first starting off. So evaluate your schedule and see how many meals and servings you think you're going to need for the week before you go shopping. So plot out your week on a calendar or whatever you use to do it on a sheet of paper, whatever works best for you. Make note of what days you have social plans and when you'll be eating out first, so you don't end up making too much food, and then start to plot out what recipes you'll eat and when. And also it's good to make note of when you'll have leftovers. And be sure to start small, especially if you're new to meal planning and meal prepping. Don't go all in and try to make an entire weekly menu ahead of time. It'll be very overwhelming. So just pick 1 or 2 recipes for the first week. And as you get more comfortable with that, you can prep more and introduce more recipes. I also like to tell people, if you're feeling overwhelmed, start with the meal that will make the biggest difference in your week right away. So if you struggle with dinner, then sit down and just write down 5 or 7 days worth of dinner meals and just plan that. And don't worry about your lunch. Don't worry about your breakfast. Just start with your dinners. So this is an example meal plan where you can see I put in some of the tips that I just talked about. So I marked the days I'm getting takeout for lunch, because if you want to accommodate a busier lifestyle, it's totally okay to incorporate these healthier convenience foods like sweet green into your plan. I've also marked that I'll be going out with friends on Friday night, so I don't need to make food for that night. And you'll also see how I've used familiar ingredients throughout the week.
Hey Amanda, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
For this, this is so helpful. Do you have like a blank one that we can use like for ourselves?
Yeah. Yep. I will either post it in the Facebook group, and if that doesn't work, I'll email it to you, and then maybe you could share it with everyone via email that way. Would that work?
Yeah, because this looks, I like the visual. Like, I feel like it would be really easy to organize for some people during the week, you know?
Yeah, perfect. Yep, I'll definitely do that.
Thank you.
Totally. I'm super visual too, and like having a structure really helps me like stick to it. So I'll definitely share that with you guys. So you'll also see, so you'll also see how I've used similar ingredients throughout the week. The italic text is where I'll have leftovers. And then For smoothies, you can like put dry ingredients together ahead of time and then blend them into a liquid in the morning so you can prep that out. And you'll notice I use my dinner leftovers for lunch on the following days. So Sunday, before the meal plan, because this meal plan starts on Monday, I'll prep the turkey meatballs, the pesto sauce, and I'll probably roast together the sweet potato and the spaghetti squash. So that way, all I have to do Monday is just pop the meatballs in the oven, and then as those are roasting, I'll make maybe a batch of overnight oats while it's roasting for breakfast the next morning. Does that make sense to you guys?
It does.
Okay, perfect. And then I saw in the chat box, somebody says, overnight oats, does anyone have any good recipes? I have such good recipes for overnight oats. I have that was my jam for so long. I have gone away from overnight oats. I think I ate them way too much, but I have so many good overnight oat recipes that I can share with you guys. And I'll post some of them in the Facebook group for you. And it's so the recipe I have for the overnight oats is really just a base recipe. And then I can give you some ideas for yummy toppings to put in. So now that your meal plan is all set, it's time to go grocery shopping. So write out a grocery list with everything you'll need, including the general amounts. The last thing you want to do is not have enough of something or buy way too much and spend unnecessary money. So I like to put general amounts on my list. You may also want to organize your list by category, just to help you stay focused and avoid making unplanned purchases. It also helps you shop a lot faster if you kind of have like all of your produce in one section, your dry goods in another section. It can really speed up that process. And before you even go to the store, shop your pantry first. You might forget you have certain ingredients that are like hiding in the back of your cabinet. Another thing to do before you go is to eat before you shop. We all know how tempting impulse buys can be when we are hungry. But if we have a budget to stick to, eating before we go grocery shopping will really help you from buying like that super mouth-watering bag of chips. Because if you're starving, you're gonna want that so bad. But if you're feeling satisfied and you're not hungry, it will be much less desirable for you. Another thing before walking to the store is bring your reusable bags. This planet is not getting any cleaner with increased plastic use. And I also recommend shopping at TJ Maxx or Marshall's. If you need like inexpensive kitchen tools or food storage containers, or believe it or not, even superfoods. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but many of like the TJ Maxx and Marshall's locations, they stock things like raw cacao powder, coconut oil, chia seeds, matcha powder. They have so many like superfoods now that they have, which is awesome. You can get them for such a great price. And remember that you can save money by shopping in the bulk section or buying frozen fruits and vegetables. And if your budget allows, you can also save even more time by purchasing the pre-cut versions of foods. So you can get like the zoodles or the spiralized sweet potatoes. That way you don't have to do it at home. So they do make pre-cut versions. They are typically a little bit more pricey, but if it speeds up your dinner, then why not? And you may want to consider grabbing extra emergency items just in case, just so you have them in the pantry for when you're feeling bored of your meal plan, or if you don't have time to meal plan, you just need a pantry with healthy options. So personally, I like to keep canned beans, dried rice, nuts, seeds. I have canned tomatoes and broth, frozen veggies and stuff like that. And you can toss all this stuff together for a vegetarian chili and then eat that one night, put it in the freezer so you have it for later. And finally, to save money and have control over ingredients, you can make your own condiments. I'm a big supporter of making your own condiments. However, if you want to save time, you can definitely find different marinades and dressings at the store. just make sure that you read the ingredients to avoid inflammatory vegetable oils and inflammatory added sugars. So inflammatory vegetable oils, a lot of times this is things like soybean oil or any hydrogenized oils or vegetable oil, things like that. These actually can be really inflammatory for your body. Healthy oils are things like coconut oil, avocado oil, olive oil. Those are way better. So some good brands that I have seen are like Primal Kitchen. They have some really great sauces. Annie's, they have some really great sauces and dressings. But if you can make them at home, like tossing together a balsamic dressing just to have, that's doesn't take much time, and you also have so much more control over the ingredients that are in it. So once you get home, don't just put everything away. A huge game changer is cleaning your food ASAP when you get home. It's been a huge game changer for me. I used to get so annoyed having to like wash my kale and herbs as I was cooking. Now it's just an easy grab and go, making my time in the kitchen way more enjoyable and efficient. So you'll definitely want to wash and maybe even chop your veggies up if you're really feeling ambitious. I don't typically do this. I just clean them as soon as you get home. Otherwise, you know, sometimes they'll just sit there because you're feeling too lazy to clean them, and then they'll go to waste, and that's always really sad. So kitchen essentials. Before we get into prep, there are some essential kitchen tools you'll need to have. Of course, not all of these are essential for everyone because we all have different needs and styles of cooking, but the ones I have in bold here are really essential. The ones that are less bold are, I guess, kind of less essential, but a sharp chef knife is everything, in my opinion. If you have a dull chef knife, nobody likes cooking with a dull knife. And it's also a lot more dangerous because it slips a lot easier. And if you cut yourself, it can actually cause a lot more damage to your skin as opposed to a really sharp chef knife. Cutting board, of course, super important. Baking sheet, non-stick pans and pots, although avoid Teflon. Teflon is incredibly toxic. So I guess I would recommend like either ceramic pots are fantastic or cast iron are really great. And then a blender or a food processor, especially if you're into making sauces like pestos and stuff like that. And then, you know, you want your measuring spoons and cups and the mixing bowls, tongs, all that stuff. Do you guys have any kitchen essentials that you use all the time that you don't see here? I'd love to know, like in the chat box, if you guys have other things that you always use. I'm going to read some of the stuff that's in here too really quick. Okay, so this is a really great question from Heather. So interested to see how making your own condiments is cheaper. Every time I try to look into that, it costs $10 plus for something that costs $1.99 in the store. So Heather, I guess I'm not 100% sure which condiments you're making, but I will say that it's cheaper because if you buy, so the $10, I guess I would assume that you mean, so if I'm making like my own balsamic dressing and I have to buy like a whole thing of balsamic vinegar, you're only going to use like a tablespoon or two of that $10 investment in the balsamic vinegar. And then you'll use a little bit of oil, you'll thin it out with some water, maybe toss in some herbs. And so when you get down to it, the portion of dressing that you've made from the ingredients that you've bought is going to be a lot cheaper for you, and it's going to be a lot healthier because there's no additives in that. So you've probably seen when you go to a grocery store and you get something that should be so simple like a balsamic dressing, it'll have like 8 ingredients on it. Some of them you might not even be able to pronounce, and those are like additives that they've put in there to help keep it fresh. So you don't have to worry about that when you make them at home yourself, and it is cheaper because you don't use all of I guess, the base product that you buy from. I hope that makes sense. Okay, perfect. So if you're hyper organized, you might want to write out a list of what needs to get done and when. If you're just starting out with meal planning, this can be really helpful. You'll want to find out what takes the longest and get that going, and then finish the other components while it's cooking. So make a list of the things you need to do first and in what order. When you start prepping, you can cook or marinate your proteins ahead of time and store them in the fridge or in the freezer to ensure that you have enough for meals on hand. This is what I meant earlier when I said to make components and use them in different meals. So again, these are things like a roasted chicken thigh, baked tofu, or marinated lentils. You can pull from these at different times and use them in different meals. Personally, I don't really cook my proteins ahead of time. I have more of like a cook once, eat twice kind of mindset when it comes to the main components of my meals, so like the proteins. Instead, I typically tend to cook them on demand and just make double the portion size. So that way I have a lot of leftovers for lunch. And when it comes to food storage, make sure that you have the right containers on hand. Glass containers instead of plastic when possible. They just last much longer, and they're also better for you and better for the environment because plastic containers do leach, or they can leach chemicals into the food, which can disrupt your hormones, but I won't get into that. And also glass containers can also let you see what's inside of them, so that way they don't go bad sitting in your refrigerator. If you have leftovers and you're not going to eat them right away, freeze them. Your future self will thank you, especially when you truly haven't had time to meal prep. And this has come in hand for me personally all the time. I actually pulled one out today because I knew this week I'm going to be relatively busy. So I'll make like huge batches of, like, I just pulled out today a lentil sauce that I made, and I'm going to use that this week. I'll probably use the leftover chicken from tonight's dinner, and I'll just pop that on top of this lentil sauce that I made. And I can also add some eggs to it in the morning and eat it for breakfast. So having these hanging out in your freezer can be lifesavers when you have a busy week coming up. So when should you do this? You pick a day that works for you and that works for your schedule. We don't need this to be rigid. It's really best to just choose a day off, so that way you have lots of time to like experiment and get comfortable as you start this new habit. Maybe you choose one day to find the recipes, write them down, and then another day you do your shopping and your prepping. So maybe you start on Wednesday and only do lunches, and every little bit helps. We don't want this to be like a stressful part of your week, but something that you look forward to because it sets you up for success. It's all about the way you frame things. So this may sound like a ton, but it's only because I've been narrating this entire process and adding in all of my tips. But really, once you get started and you start doing it, it really does become second nature, and the process will come a lot more naturally to you. And it really is. Decide what recipes you want to make, plan it out on a piece of paper or a calendar, and I'll send you guys one so you can do that super easy. Go shopping and get cooking. So now I want to talk about how to keep a well-stocked fridge and pantry, so that if you haven't had time to meal prep, or you forgot, or you don't feel like eating whatever you have made, you have some backups so you can be a little bit flexible. So basically, if you don't have a plan, these are just the things to grab at the grocery store so you can put something together if need be. So first, you're going to want to clean out your pantry. Get rid of expired food. Get rid of the things that aren't good for you or for your health. Maybe consider donating them to a shelter or a food pantry. if you don't feel like throwing them out. And organize your kitchen in a way that helps with your workflow. So that can really help you actually see the food that you don't want to forget that you have. For a well-stocked fridge, always have berries. They're rich in antioxidants. They're great in the mornings. You can get them fresh or frozen. They're great to add to smoothies, to yogurt, oatmeal. Sometimes they're great on salads. Sometimes they're great for dessert if you're feeling something sweet. And fresh vegetables, of course, those are key. It's always good to have some sliced too, like carrots, celery, or cucumber, so that way they're ready for snacks. And always have leafy greens. They're easy and nutritious. You can add them to smoothies. They're great as a salad base. You should have leafy greens at least once a day. And have 1 to 2 fresh herbs. Fresh herbs are like my secret weapon. And this is, of course, much easier to do in the summer where herbs are super abundant. But you can keep fresh herbs like parsley, cilantro, dill, basil, rosemary. There's so many to choose from out there. And I'll toss them into salads. Sometimes I'll just make an herb salad where I'll do a little bit of lettuce. And if I have some cilantro that's going bad, I'll just, not everybody likes cilantro, so I guess that's not a great one to use for an example, but maybe like parsley or dill, just toss them into a salad and it adds so much flavor to your salad. It's incredible. You can also cook them in oil. It's a little bit to add a little bit of extra flavor to dishes. Use them as a garnish or infuse it in your water. I don't know if you guys have ever put like rosemary in your water bottle or basil and strawberries in your water. It is so good. To preserve the life of your greens, so whether it's like lettuce or herbs, store all of your greens in an airtight container with a cloth or paper towel. So I have in my fridge a large container. On the bottom, I have like a little rag. It's actually like a face cloth. I bought a ton of them at TJ's for this purpose. So I have a little cloth at the bottom, and then put your herbs and all of your greens on top of that cloth or towel, or paper towel. It doesn't have to be fabric. And then sandwich it with another cloth or paper towel. So what this does is it's going to absorb the moisture, so that way they don't mold really fast. And you can make your herbs and your greens last for like 2 weeks by doing this. Also, hold on, I'm gonna take a drink of water. Condiments, sauces, and dips. Oh, sorry, I skipped over meal prep foods. So meal prep foods are also great to having stocked in your fridge. Overnight oats, again, those are a great breakfast to have. Some roasted vegetables, some prepped grains, legumes, stuff like that. Always great to have on hand. Condiment sauces and dips, again, whether they're homemade or not. Just if they're not, make sure you're looking at the ingredients. And like I said before, these are a great way to change up flavor in your meals, especially if you're getting bored of a certain meal. Just changing out the sauce or adding a sauce can really make all the difference in the world. Another thing I want to mention is it's always good to store your proteins on the bottom of your shelf to avoid cross-contamination. So you want your bottom shelf to be your meat shelf, and then your produce and everything above that. And then for a well-stocked pantry, the first grocery trip will definitely be a little bit pricier than others because you'll be building your healthy pantry and getting all the nutritious and shelf-stable foods that can help you put these meals together. But remember, it's an investment into your long-term health. And if you can't do it all at once, that's totally fine. You can build your pantry over time. I recommend keeping things like flours, grains, beans, nuts, and seeds stocked at all times. For me personally, I'm a very visual person, also type A. So I like to store all of these things in glass jars, and I'll sometimes label them, sometimes I won't. just so I keep my pantry very organized and very like visually appealing. And it also makes cooking a lot more fun for me and enjoyable because I am such a visual person. But they store a lot longer when you keep them sealed in a jar also. So for example, growing up as a kid, the brown sugar, I'm sure you guys have all like purchased brown sugar. You use it once and you go back to it and it's like this cement block that you can't do anything with. I recommend when you first buy it, if it's a cement block, there's nothing you can really do about it. But when you first buy it in the bags, take it out of the bag, put it in a sealed glass jar, and it will last so much longer. Same with nuts and stuff like that. Spices, this is another great way to add variety. I'd recommend having a few blends on hand, especially if you don't know much about how to pair spices well together. Although I guess I'd argue that there's no like bad spice pairing and that they all go great together, but that might be my adventurous chef coming out. I personally love Italian seasoning, gram masala, curry, and fajita seasoning. These are all things that I love to have on hand. If you guys have any great seasonings, definitely put them in the chat box as well. I'd love to know what your favorites are. Different oils that don't need to be refrigerated are great. So things like coconut, olive oil, avocado oil. Sesame oil is a great flavor enhancer. If you do use it though, you only need a little bit because it's very bold. Ghee is something that I introduced into my diet last year. Ghee is a form of clarified butter and it is unreal. It's like, tastes like brown butter. It's so good. And it's very healing. It's common in Ayurvedic healing. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but ghee is awesome. And also nut and seed butters. These are a great addition to add like healthy fats to your meals. So when I say seed butters, I mean things like sunflower butter or sun butter. I don't know if you guys have tried that. I'd love to know if you have. Sun butter has been like a recent obsession of mine, but it's made from sunflower seeds. And there's also like pumpkin seed butter. They're a lot more available now than they once were, and you can just find them in the nut butter aisle. And then healthy snacks that are shelf stable. So things like kale chips. My favorite crackers brand is the Mary's Gone crackers. They have very, very little additives. They're dairy-free, gluten-free. They're very hearty. I absolutely love them. And then I always keep something like canned salmon in my pantry as well for when I get into a bind. I do want to warn you guys though about canned tuna, which can be very high in mercury and can lead to like heavy metal toxicity if you eat it all the time. So I strongly encourage you to mix in some canned salmon. If you're an avid tuna fish eater, canned salmon is a great alternative that has much less mercury content in it. So that is all I have for you guys. And now I want to open up the floor to everyone. And feel free to unmute yourself. Ugh, oh my gosh, can't talk. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask some questions, share some tips, some of your favorite recipes. And yeah, I'd love to hear any questions that you guys have.
So I was just wondering, because you mentioned it earlier, if you were going to share any recipes for like your go-to for like dressings, like the peanut sauce, I'd be really interested in it, especially if they're like easy items. Because I know a lot of times when the frustration with Google searching is a lot of times like when you find a recipe, they're like they'll say in 3 quick easy steps, but then you get down to the actual recipe and it's 25 items that you have to measure out and go through like 3 days of like Venetian yoga just to get done. So for like, especially like for dressings and the pesto and stuff like that, are you going to be sharing kind of like the simple go-to recipes that you have?
Yeah, Heather. So it's so funny that you say that because I totally know what you mean. Like and I don't know about you, but I'll get like in this recipe hole where I'll find I'll go Google searching for a recipe and then I find like 30 versions of this recipe. And I'm like, I don't even know what to do at this point. And now I'm overwhelmed that I can't make it.
Right.
So I totally get that feeling. And yeah, I'll share some with you guys. I do post a lot on my I have a lot of them are already on my Instagram. But I will certainly share some of them with you guys. I need to be posting more recipes on my Instagram. I've been kind of slacking with that, but I have some that I have typed out that I'll share with you. I guess the best ones that I'll share with you guys, so you can look out for them, are the pesto, which I will say it's a non-traditional pesto because I try to avoid dairy as much as possible. So it's a variation of pesto, but you can't even tell the difference. It tastes very similar. And the cheesy flavor is nutritional yeast. So if you don't have nutritional yeast, you could probably swap it out for like Parmesan, but nutritional yeast is really great to have on hand because it's also super high in B12. So I'll share with you the pesto. I have a really great balsamic dressing recipe. Oh, and another one I don't think I talked about in the presentation, but I have a miso sauce, which, have you guys heard of miso before? Or have you used miso at all?
I've heard of miso soup.
Yep. So same miso. I bring it up because it's a really great probiotic. So it has a lot of like beneficial bacteria in it, like kombucha and kimchi and all that stuff. And it's super, super savory and umami. It goes really great on fish and chicken. And that's another easy recipe I can share with you guys. And then the peanut sauce, I'll do that too.
Awesome.
Yeah, sauces have really been a savior for me because I like I mentioned before, I struggled with gut issues, so I had to go on like this healing diet where I had to be very particular about the ingredients in my diet. So I started making all kinds of homemade sauces, and so I've been fortunate to learn, different easy techniques. And again, a bunch of these you can freeze. So like pesto, believe it or not, freezes super well. So I actually just pulled out a pesto today from my freezer, and I just make a huge batch. That's another thing. Make big batch of sauces, that way you always have them. Anybody else have any questions?
I have a quick question. So I tried like a form of meal prepping before, and trying to use better ingredients, and the particular directions that were kind of listed for anybody who was following the meal prep is to use like certain fruits and vegetables and to avoid others. Like this particular one said, like, don't eat a lot of broccoli because it's actually not good for you. Or like it didn't include peppers, it didn't include a whole lot of cauliflower, carrots were missing. And I was like, okay, nobody's really explaining why those aren't included in the list when you're making healthier meals.
Right.
Are there like certain vegetables that you either should not really be eating a whole lot of, or just kind of cut out completely, or does that really just depend on, your taste, I guess?
Great question. So yeah, I've also seen a lot of like, I guess not like a fad diet, but there are a lot of people out there who say like, oh, you can't have white potatoes, or you can't have cauliflower, you can't have broccoli. And in my opinion, and in general, variety is the spice of life. And in my opinion, no, there's no vegetables that are off limits ever. I was just talking about how I had to do this healing diet for my gut, and that was only meant to be a temporary thing. So it was called the FODMAP diet. So in that, it was like I couldn't eat, actually very similar to the list you were just saying, I couldn't eat cauliflower, broccoli, no garlic or onions and all this stuff. And typically those diets are for a very short-term period and are targeted to help people with whatever they might be going through. But if you're a healthy person, by all means, eat the rainbow, eat as much diversity as you can. And that is honestly that's like one of the foundational things that you can do for your health, is to eat as much variety as possible. As far as like portion size goes, I mean, you probably shouldn't eat broccoli like every single day, and you shouldn't eat like white potatoes every single day. So you do have to be mindful of like rotating these things in and out. But I've actually just started listening to this book called Fiber Fueled, and it's been so insightful because for me, during that FODMAP diet, I kind of got stuck in this box, and it did disturb my relationship with food for a while. So it's been hard for me to kind of get back into this more accepting like headspace. But there's so much scientific data out there that say the more diverse your diet is, the healthier that you are as a person. And I truly believe that. And so if you can eat broccoli and you can eat cauliflower and you can eat all these things, by all means, do it, because you will be so much healthier by doing so. And another reason why is because they all have different levels of antioxidants, and they all have different levels of protein, of phytochemicals, of all of these things. So if you're eating the same thing every single day, you're not getting that diversity, and you're not feeding all of the microbes in your gut. So you want to have as much as you can in order to keep yourself strong, in order to keep your immune system strong. So if you can eat all those things, totally do it. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that was super helpful. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Microbiome likes fiber. Yes, Alicia. I love that. Any other questions? Don't hesitate to ask.
No, I thought that was
Ooh.
great.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, Marion, I like your comment in here. I found a